Welcome back to our Sutta exploration series, where we begin the new year around the world, 2026, with a new Sutta. And what a Sutta this is. This week, the phrase, the mother of all suttas, kept ringing in my ear, just because of the significance of this sutta that we will be commencing the year with, which happens to be the very first of the long discourses of the Buddha, the collection of discourses that is called the Digha Nikaya, the long. Digha means long. The long discourses, and oftentimes avoided type of a sutta. And this happens to be at the top of the list for many, to simply avoid looking at, probing, or even encouraging people to be exposed to this wonderful discourse, in fact. And whenever it has been discussed, or it is discussed at times today, it is seen in terms of the Buddha pointing out what is, or what happens to be, the wrong views of other faiths, other teachers, other philosophers. Usually, unfortunately, this is what to this day, even the scholar type bhikkhus presented as such, when it is not. I mean, it has that, of course. We will see how the Buddha is addressing the faiths or belief systems, narratives, if you will, the schools of thought that were prevalent at the time, his contemporaries. Yes, he does say that, and we will see how the Buddha is unraveling each of these, going deep into them, and pulling the rug from underneath each of these as well, to highlight the differences that exist between all that there is out there and the Dhamma, by explaining as to why they are out there versus what the Dhamma is teaching us. But aside from highlighting the differences, the Buddha's explanation is no different than what we have already seen again and again and again and again in countless other suttas, which is paticca-samuppada. Causal relations, the dependency, the dependent arising of phenomena. And that has nothing to do with highlighting the views of some other faith, some other religion, this and that. Of course, it's reflected through and through. However, this is not simply to tell us how great the Dhamma is, how great Buddhism is, or the dispensation of the Buddha is, versus all that is out there. This is far more than that. This discourse is amazing because it goes into the crux of the matter, as it were. Things that people think has nothing to do with the sutta, such as the importance of feelings, is highlighted, as well as, well, where does feeling come from? What instigates feeling to begin with? Contact. And that goes across all boundaries of views and religious thought and schools of thought, etc., etc. So we are part of it. So the Buddha is addressing not some other sects, followers of other sects, some other religions. He's talking to us. All those of us who believe, who want to practice and who are really practicing the dispensation of the Buddha by looking at the relationship of phenomena and how our understanding of phenomena is being animated. What instigates it? My worldview, for example. So this is oftentimes completely missed out, ignored, or not even made people aware of. So this is why today's sutta, which we will, unlike many usually we do, where we meet every other week, I wanted it to be, whenever we're dealing with the Digha Nikaya suttas, exploring them, it's a shame to divide it into every 2 weeks or every 2 sessions per month. Instead, it needs to be done once every week to keep things fresh in our mind, to allow things to sink in, to really be absorbed until the next session where new material about it is explored and introduced within the sutta itself. Plus, given the fact that I think it came out, the sutta itself, this translation, which I just recently finished, before the conclusion of the 2025 year, I think it reached 67 pages. So today we will not be covering 67 pages. So my attempt is to cover as much as we can, of course, without rushing. However, some of the material you will encounter if you recall some of the other earlier suttas from the Long Discourses, Digha Nikaya, that you've seen me cover here, includes certain sections specifically pertaining to Sīla, or virtuous living, or virtuous practice, virtuous behavior, where you see the Buddha discussing what is seen as virtuous behavior or practice in his contemporaries outside of this dispensation of the Dhamma, and how it is completely different than what the Buddha or the Tathagata practices, or a bhikkhu within this tradition that the Buddha teaches, the dispensation of the Buddha, of the Tathagata, really is. What is understood as Sīla, and he gives the 3-tiered explanation of Sīla. Now, these are pertaining to the recluses, of course, the asceticism, the ascetic life, specifically of the bhikkhu, again, in contrast to whatever was in practice at the time. So this theme, in one form or another, does play out about 12 in 12 different suttas, the beginning suttas, 12 suttas around of the Long Discourses. And of course, this being the very first Brahmajāla Sutta, which I translated as the all-embracing net of wrong views. We see that the mentioning of those 3 tiers, from gross level to mid to more subtle, refined practices of Sīla. So the reason why I mentioned that is because, if you recall, in the Potthapada Sutta, for example, we did go through those, and I did explain in detail, at length, as we were going through it. That's why it took a long time as well. But my effort here will be to read it simply, those, when we get to that section, which is in the first part of the sutta, by the way, the Sīla section, which I will not give that much of a commentary. If you like to hear it again, I recommend you listen to the commentary section of the Potthapada Sutta, which we've covered several months ago, again, which is part of the Digha Nikaya. So I wanted to mention that there's so much to cover. That's why I'm trying to cover as much as I can, just to, it's like a prologue or the beginning of some form of an introduction, which I'm trying to offer, because this is a giant. I know you've heard me say that about several suttas, but this is the mother of all giants, because this is setting the tone for whatever is to come. And in the case of the Digha Nikaya, it's 34 suttas in total. This happens to be just one, the first. So, and it deserves the respect that it is due, which unfortunately it is not given. And especially in these days, it's simply, unfortunately, it has become a mere scholarly adventure for academics to delve deep into commentary after commentary after commentary, what others have said about this, and what could this mean in context of other traditions or what came in history. You will be lost. The humanity of the suttas are lost when we leave them at the hands of scholars. And the Dhamma is all about us. So alive, it's so real, it's so about you and your own specific, unique challenges that you are facing in your own life. If it weren't even 10%, or if it was 1% less of that, then the Buddha would not have taught it. That is why he calls it ehipassiko, come and see. It invites investigation. It invites examination. And how can we examine something if we do not involve it into our own lives, if we don't bring it in and embrace it and put it in our own particular life conditions and situations and challenges that we individually are facing? The Dhamma is and has everything to do with that. Otherwise, how can there be release from samsara if it's not about you and your own situations and your own challenges, the difficulties? So it's not a matter of adhering to a cult-like thinking, a mass following of a tradition or dogma. No. Arahantship does not happen like that. Freedom does not come because you're holding the hands of other similar thinkers. It doesn't happen through osmosis. It's an inclusion. You include the Dhamma into your life. You invite it. Where that's the only place that we will have understanding take place. That's what makes it sanditthiko as well. And this sutta is explaining that. How? Well, we see the first historical aspects of it, what ensues, where the Buddha is. We see him in Nalanda, modern-day Nalanda, and we see how there is this Brahmin teacher who keeps slandering, backbiting, criticizing harshly the Buddha, who happens to be walking very close by, but he is criticizing the Buddha to his own student. So the Brahmin is talking to his student, apprentice, pupil, and highlighting the wrong things about the Dhamma that this recluse Gotama is teaching. Everything that is wrong in his opinion, he's saying it, he's giving it a piece of his mind. Meanwhile, his own pupil is saying, yeah, but, excuse me, the recluse Gotama does not adhere to such thoughts. He doesn't teach that. He does this. He lives like this. So there is this argument going on. And then these ascetics reach a place, and in those days, in ancient India, like there would be caravanserais or rest stops for ascetics, for recluses, specifically built by the royalty or the heads of that area, the region, to help religious practitioners, Brahmins, ascetics, recluses, samanas, basically, to come to rest, to spend the night, or maybe to also engage in discussions. So that's where they also go to rest. And after the Buddha is there, the bhikkhus are there, so are these Brahmins. And then the next day, the bhikkhus couldn't help but hear the discuss or the arguments going on between pupil and teacher. And they convey that to the Buddha. And the Buddha expresses, or he teaches them how they should not be so concerned about the views and explanations or harsh criticisms of others addressed to him or to even themselves, to the bhikkhus. And instead, he lays out the views that are prevalent and have been prevalent. They are at the basis of thinking and speculative views all over the place at all time. He says how they will be 62 total that we will encounter, and the Buddha is going to break them down one at a time in detail, the 62 views, and how these views are at the basis of thinking that was held in the past, those that are being promulgated and practiced currently at his time, contemporaries, as well as in the future. And you're going to see modern ways or schools of psychology or philosophy or science, things like fancy new terms like creationism or atheism or secularism, all these fancy terms and different isms, they actually have their roots in here, through and through. There's nothing uniquely different about any of these new ideas, whether today or 200 years from now or 2,000 or 200,000 years from now, when people come up with their own ideas. When you look at the Brahmajāla Sutta, you see the structure that they all fall into and find their kind of little kiosk and they land in, because these are speculative views. Now, coming back to the Brahmajāla as such, it's therefore holds a very cardinal importance in the library or garden of suttas, discourses, because again, it has everything to do with addressing the narratives that people have, we have. We start the day by having a certain narrative. We open our eyes, already we have certain worldview to begin with. It is our tracing paper, if you will. It is the pattern that usually works for us. Good or bad, doesn't matter. We apply it nevertheless because it makes us become more familiar with the world. The world becomes more digestible. We can process today, we can process our emotions better if I follow this worldview, if I follow this in philosophy, it's called also hermeneutics, modes of interpretation, how you interpret, give meaning, significance to things. When I was first introduced to this in college, I was like, wow. And the next time I saw an ambulance pass by on the street in Los Angeles, it was like the sirens, the sound. They're one thing, but my mind, in my brain, I am interpreting the siren as, okay, this is a state of emergency for someone. So hermeneutically, I interpreted it. So the symbol, the sign, the siren, or even if the sirens aren't going off and I just look and I see the flashy colors, the red, maybe the cross, and ambulance, perhaps written backwards so that I can see from the rear view mirror, already tells my brain, okay, put everything aside, this is serious for someone. Or when you're stopping at a red light. Why did you stop? Because your brain interpreted that color. And then it suddenly changes to green. Okay, now there's a different interpretation, different understanding, and then you hit the gas pedal and you move. These are all modes of understanding and interpreting how you manage stress, how you manage pain when you're under difficulty. What do? You must have a worldview. For some, it is very, you might say, destructive, such as if you're under stress, they will engage in some type of an addictive behavior or something, whatever they're used to. Helpful, destructive, damaging, or not really is irrelevant. What they feel closer to. And this is key in this sutta. Because we're going to see, after the Buddha has delineated all 62 views, he will turn to the bhikkhus and say, but all these, he says, are based on contact. Why? Because each of these philosophers, each of these thinkers, have a certain feeling about their views. In essence, they have certain prejudices about their views, which they go about using their intellect, their debating skills, their concepts, and speculative views to validate, to authenticate, to give credence to their prejudice. But why? Why prejudice? Feeling. So even if the person has graduated from, I don't know, Oxford, MIT, Harvard, whatever, speaking with type of a language which requires you to take out a dictionary to understand what are they saying, fancy words, etc. And you might say, I think he has a point. But what they're running on, the fuel that is animating them, is feeling, which we use the intellect to validate. And this is the basis of speculation, because it has not been truly tasted, understood, processed. So the argumentation, debating, is not the mode of unraveling the truth. You're simply dealing with the minds that you're dealing with, who are debating, doing the debating. They might be extremely mediocre minds, which you have a lot of today. They come, they clash, and somebody's going to come out the victorious one, or the one who beats others. But that doesn't mean anything as far as the truth is concerned, reality is concerned, reality of experience. So the Buddha is going to address this in the 62 views that nobody knew about. Everybody just followed and accepted. But here we see the sutta where it pulls the veil and allows us a glimpse into all of these ways of thinking and interpreting. That was available at the time in India, but not just in India. India was one of the most, if not the most at the time, philosophically advanced country, place, region in the world. But as I said, today, these are just as relevant as they were then, back then. So the problem then is the clinging that goes on. If you have prejudice, you will cling. That's what we can understand from prejudice, right? Because the feeling took place, it has a certain significance, and this has a lot to do with associations. The feeling itself is usually associated to memory. Think of it as sannyas, perceptions. Now, how fuzzy you feel about that feeling, it might have been a horrific event where you were present, but someone else was present as well. But certain other things were associated for that person in that same setting. And 20, 30 years later, that same event represents something totally different to that person versus you. Why? Associations. How you felt at that moment. Maybe somebody was there looking at you smilingly, caressing your face as a child, or giving you a sandwich when you were hungry, whereas the other one was being beaten. Same scene, same event, but two different sets of circumstances. That's why sometimes individuals in the family might say, oh, I hate my childhood, or this. And the other one looks at them surprised, shocked perhaps. How could you say that? It was a lovely memory. Yeah, but mom or dad favored you, not me. Hey, Worldview, completely different. So the modes of interpretation have everything to do with the feelings associated with them. And feelings cannot take place without the six sense spheres: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. They get triggered by what? Contact to their own objects. Eyes to visible forms, ears to audible sounds, nose to fragrances, smells, certain smells, taste to the tongue, taste buds, picking it up, horrible tastes, etc., to the tongue, the body and tactile objects, things that you could touch, and the mind. And its object is, or are, ideas, sannyas, thoughts, concepts. The meeting of the two is the equivalent consciousness of each. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness, manovinyana. So when these speculations are happening, they are happening divorced from this whole mechanism that is taking place. They're completely oblivious to it. They're simply functioning from a position of prejudice and therefore speculation, irrespective of what is really taking place. The mechanism is not even being looked at. What is really taking place is not being looked at. So it turns into a belief. So you look at any religious belief out there, including, ironically enough, Buddhism, where it has turned into another belief, another tradition that is never practiced properly by most people, because it's just a rites and rituals thing for most people, because people have to be honest with themselves. So speculation can get you only so far. When you're a child, okay, you can get away with it, believing in Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, etc. But when you're growing up, you're supposed to be transforming yourself into a more mature person with understanding. And that's why we have these modes of thought, which are out there for us to look at carefully and probe to see whether they are truly relevant to the life that I'm supposed to be living and growing in the midst of. This is why I mentioned how this sutta specifically, and any other sutta that is addressing other practitioners, other faiths, other traditions, other schools of thought, is not just that, it's also about us, because many of us have veered away, have drifted away from the Dhamma proper. What the Buddha taught in these suttas, in the early suttas, because the teachings are still intact, luckily for us. So that's what we are exploring in a nutshell. So I know I'm saying many words, but I'm trying to give you snippets of what to look for and how to prepare. And there's nothing to be intimidated by as we're exploring the sutta, nothing to be bored from or because of. It's a fascinating sutta because when we look at it with the right perspective, from the right perspective. So coming back to the mechanics of it, basically you have within the 62 views, you have 18 views and 44 views. So they're packaged into two major groupings. Ditti is, or miccha ditti sometimes, but ditti is the shorter version, which means views. And when you see ditti on its own, depending on the context, but usually it's referring to wrong view. Otherwise, we say, Lord Buddha says, samma ditti, correct or right view. So these are all 62 views are ditthis or miccha ditthis, wrong views. So, and people have a tendency of latching on, clinging on to them, including the Dhamma. If and when we cling to the Dhamma with our own speculations, and you have a lot of that, because it's not, speculation is not something uniquely belonging to a specific religion or a group of people, followers of a sect, followers of a certain tenet or belief. No, it simply stems from ignorance. And that does not hold a passport, does not come with a certain race or religion. Hence, we have plenty of wrong views within the Dhamma. And I'm not even going outside the bounds of Theravada. I'm just talking about Theravada right now. The earliest teachings that we have of the Buddha that supposedly are within the Theravada, we have a lot of ditti, wrong forms of interpretation, because people have gone AWOL, had left behind the suttas and gone into commentaries. So this brings us back to the sutta itself, to the reality of things. So we have in the first group 18 beliefs related to the past. So the first group is about the past, having to do with past history, past experiences, pertaining to which or dependent on which a person comes up with their own theory and advocates it or promulgates it or practices and teaches others about it as fact, as a belief. Here you will see those who claim to be eternalists, those who say the universe is eternal, there's a self that is eternal, God, there's a higher being that is eternal, etc. And you have the different derivations or branchings of this within the 18. And you will easily, in your mind, if you look around and see whatever religions that are out there that you're familiar with, you will see easily those religions fitting into those slots of the 18. It just perfectly fits. And you'll see, oh, that's wrong view though. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we have the Dhamma. That's why we practice the Dhamma. Because there is such a thing as a correct path and there is an incorrect path. So the past. So you're going to see here in this category, people who have used some part of their experiences and used it as valid proof that such a thing exists. So for example, in passing, I just say how there have been yogis who have the ability or had the ability to see parts of their past lives, some of their past lives, maybe 1 or 2 lifetimes, and some that have seen tens in the tens, not even hundreds of lifetimes, some that have seen more than that. And then they come up with a conclusion. They know they've experienced this and they say, this is how it is. The universe was like this, it's always like this, and it's always will be like this. Why? Based on that experience. Now, despite the fact that this was an actual experience they had through their jhanas, by the way, or through the Dibba Chakku, but it's limited, the divine eye. When you practice meditation in a certain way under guidance of a teacher who knows these things, you can penetrate into the past, into your mind. But that it has its own limitations. So the evidence that you have will have its own limitations as well. But the person comes out and claims it as a fact, as a truth. And now you have a school of thought, such as a person saying, the universe is maybe 50,000 years. Because I can't remember anything prior to 50,000. There you go. The person explained it away. But it's like a person looking at a painting or a jigsaw puzzle or only catching a portion of a film and saying, this is the movie about. Yeah, but did you see what happened past minute 52:23 seconds of the film? No, but it doesn't matter, but I saw all that. But that's how we have. So it's like that image or the simile that the Buddha gives, I think it was in the Udana, of the blind men who were invited by the king to come and see, blind at birth, by the way. 50 blind men were brought together from different parts of the kingdom, but under the condition that they had never seen an elephant in their entire lives. And there's a tent made up, and the Buddha gives this example, a simile. And one portion of the elephant's body is covered, and a group of these 50, a group of from them, will go and only check one portion of the body of the elephant. So at the end of the day, you had different groups, 5 different groups came to the king, and the king asked these blind men, so what is an elephant like? So somebody said, oh, it's a large fan, my lord. For some of them, you need to fan because they only touch the ear of the elephant. The other group said, no, it's a large trunk, because they only touch the trunk of the elephant. Another one said, no, it's like a big reservoir of grain. It's like because they touched the belly of the elephant. They were only allowed to touch that. And another group said, no, they're like huge columns that support a building, because they only touch the legs of the elephant. And the king laughs at them. And meanwhile, they start fighting amongst each other, the blind. They say, no, the elephant is all about the ear. No, it's all about the column. Limited information is very dangerous. So you will see such characters who say the world is quasi-eternal versus those who believe it is completely eternal, etc. And then you have the 44 beliefs about the future. And here you can fit in any of those nihilists or annihilationists, such as the modern day atheists, for example. Oh, the light's out. Once I die, I die. And they have this air about them that very nonchalant, like, I have it all thought out. I know better than you. You who are a believer, I'm superior to you because I'm intelligent. I'm educated. I apply the scientific method. Meanwhile, they neglect to consider that they are very much of believers themselves, blind believers. Because you have to believe in that that's the case. That it just lights up. Once I die, lights up. Whatever I did stays here. So there's no karma. There's no consequences to my actions, good or bad. So what's the point? Hedonism is based like that. I don't care what happens to you, what I do. If I can get away with it, power to me. That's the modern day culture that we see. But the Buddha also lists all these 44 different views on this. So, and it is dangerous when we neglect to consider the feeling aspect of our thoughts and worldviews, because the reason why I'm choosing to have this narrative for me to follow day in, day out, is that I'm neglecting to consider my feelings about the situation, my narratives, my worldviews, my interpretation, my point of view. And this is why a lot of people do not like to challenge or have their thoughts or worldviews challenged. This is why we need to have also humility and open-mindedness, which we say we do have, but we don't, because the repetitiveness of our behavior or our actions will clearly indicate that. Because the outcome is the same. I'm miserable at the end of this encounter, at the end of this set of actions I take in response to these situations I find myself in. But why did I do it again? I'm fine here. This is what I do. Growing up, I would hear about, let's say, Chinese food, Indian food, for example, Persian food. And I came across over the years, I met friends, I made friends. And then I would ask them, oh, have you ever had this food? And they would say, no. I remember one particular case where a person said, no. I don't touch any of those stuff, like that type of cuisine. Well, why? What's wrong with, let's say, Sri Lankan cooking or Chinese cooking or Indian or anything? Like, have you tried them? No, I don't like them. But have you tried it? No. Why wouldn't you try it? It's too far out there for them. But as it comes to the ways of thinking, again, hermeneutics, how we understand and interpret life, the ongoings of life, the world situations, etc., our views about what is true, what is just, what is equal, what should be fair, you see that feeling has everything to do with it. A few years ago, we went through the COVID situation, and everybody was jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, it's science, science, science. And as a scientist, if you really were a scientist, you would look and see there's nothing scientific about it. People were pushed into action based on how they felt. I saw people with rage in their eyes, and these were very professional, supposedly, academically, with having had all the right degrees, all the professional agencies or groups of, communities that they have academically in the field of psychology, psychotherapy, etc., academics. You would expect some rigorous approach to looking at life. No, they blindly believed what was being tossed at them as facts. And when you ask them about historical records or this or that, like, how was this different than the Nazis in the 30s? When you're isolating someone simply because they don't agree with your opinion. These people wanted to put this other group of people into jail, into concentration camps. In their mind, that was perfectly fine. Except that we were living in 2021. Long after the Nazis supposedly had gone away. But why? I was curious to know, why are we doing that? Why are we allowing ourselves to say this or be like this? Feeling. So the person will use whatever intellectual ideas that they have, interpretations of it, to simply furnish support, to give credence, validation to their prejudices. Completely eliminated life as it's happening. As it's happening. That's why people were able to push people into the rooms, into dark spaces, and said, no, leave the sun, bright sun outside. It's poisonous. You don't need vitamin D. It's poison. And we believed it. Billions of people believed it. And you're scratching your head like, how could you believe this? This is insanity. No. It's adherence, ignorantly, to feeling, which was done by contact, triggered by contact. So this is very relevant. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm using my limited understanding of, using my similes, let's say, from life as we have it today, things that are familiar to us. But it all comes down to lobha, dosa, moha. Lobha is greed, wanting, longing, something. certain thing, which makes you feel a certain way. Dosa means pushing something away, the opposite of that, right? Hating, aversive, hating, angrily, becoming irritable towards something. And you want to push it away. That's dosa, which brings about anger, right? And then you have the last one, which is moha. This is the delusion, which we maintain by willfully ignoring the facts, the questions that pop up and say, this doesn't match. There's something wrong. So the speculator is one who goes back to those speculations, says, no, it's going to work. The formula is wrong. No, it's going to work. But it's wrong. No, it's going to work. Okay, it never works. Why? Because the person is still kept in samsara, in the clutches of pain, dukkha, cyclical, ceaseless rebirth cycles. So in a nutshell, that's what the Brahmajāla Sutta is going to do in the second section. And in the third section, you're going to see how the Buddha presents the dispensation that he teaches, how the practitioner sees the six sense bases. He sees the contact, sees how the contact affects the feeling. And because of that, the presence of understanding and looking carefully, squarely at feeling itself, the person comes into the present and sees here and now what is really taking place, irrespective of any view. This is the only place where understanding can take place. Kind of rhymed. So middle path is all about that. It stands tall. It stands untouched by these extremes that I mentioned, those two camps. So that's why the practitioner, the one who really is on the right path, which is the Noble Eightfold Path, does not fall victim to contact. Otherwise, the Buddha keeps saying about the 62 views, about all those who practice them or believe in them, he says in Pali, it's beautiful. Tadapi passa paccaya. That too is conditioned by, dependent on, totally instigated by contact. Tadapi. That too. He lists all 62 at the end. But anyone practicing this dispensation with understanding and seeing how things really are stands on the other shore. And so you see, this is not about just others, other sects. So anyhow, I think that's enough of an introduction. So I appreciate your patience. It's necessary. I'm not an enthusiast of introductions as such, like academic pages and pages of introduction that is mind-bogglingly tedious, make things untenable, at best. But just enough for us to relate with the sutta in a better way, and to allow us to relinquish some of our ideas and ditthis, wrong views about the sutta. That's why we explore the suttas, to relinquish our old views of things, our speculations, and make the Dhamma relevant to our life. So, yeah. So Digha Nikaya 1, DN1, Long Discourses, the Brahmajāla Sutta, which comes from the Sīla Khandha Vagga, the section on the training in virtue. In English, I translate it as all-encompassing net of wrong views. Net of wrong views. By the way, the sutta is, even though I translated it, but I'm now forced to, we're proofreading, Aya and I, and so the whole thing, once it's proofread, that's when I'll have it posted on as a PDF. But just bear with me. We should have it done within the next few weeks, the proofreading part. It's a beautiful sutta. It deserves to be properly proofread, post-translation. So anyhow, the first section is paribhājakata. discussion about wandering recluses. So let's begin. This is what I personally heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was traveling on the main road stretching between Rajagha and Nalanda, accompanied by a large group of his Bhikkhu Sangha, numbering nearly 500 bhikkhus. Meanwhile, the wandering ascetic Suppiya was also traveling on the main road, stretching between Rajagha and Nalanda, accompanied by his own pupil, the young Brahmadatta. Now, while walking, the wandering ascetic Suppiya kept on speaking in a derogatory and demeaning manner against the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, as he criticized all three. However, his pupil, the young Brahmadatta, kept on speaking in a respectful manner about the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, as he spoke in praise of all three. So these two, both teacher and pupil, walked closely behind the Blessed One and the Sangha of bhikkhus, making statements based on what they thought while directly contradicting one another. Then the Blessed One, along with the accompanying Sangha of bhikkhus, entered the royal rest house in the Ambalatika garden with the intention of spending the night there. Soon after, Suppiya, along with his own pupil, Brahmadatta, also went into the royal rest house in the Ambalatika garden to spend the rest of the day. But even after having entered the rest house, the two continued contradicting each other, where Suppiya, the wandering ascetic, kept criticizing and finding blame with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, accompanying the Blessed One, whereas his own student Brahmadatta continued highlighting the amazing qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha of bhikkhus while praising them in different ways. Makes you wonder why the student is still with the teacher. If he sees the benefits or the wonderful qualities of the triple gem, why is he still hanging out with the wrong teacher? It kind of resonates into today's world of practitioners as well, by the way. Then at sunrise, a group of several bhikkhus gathered in the meeting area and brought up a theme that was most noticeably taking place around them, and thus began discussing what they had witnessed. In this manner, they spoke. It is quite remarkable and utterly marvelous, friends. Indeed, it is truly amazing, friends, how the Blessed One, the perfectly self-awakened Buddha, directly knows and comprehends with his unhindered vision, as he can clearly and so penetratingly see through the various dispositions and, proclivities of sentient beings, no matter how diverse they might be. After all, this wandering ascetic Suppiya has been making disparaging statements about the Buddha, disparaging statements about the Dhamma, and disparaging statements about the Sangha, while criticizing them non-stop. Meanwhile, Suppiya's own student, Brahmadatta, keeps contradicting his own teacher, as he points out the marvelous and beautiful qualities of the Buddha, the marvelous and beautiful qualities of the Dhamma, and the marvelous and beautiful qualities of the Sangha. In this manner, friends, both teacher and pupil have been engaged in a constant back and forth, making contradictory statements to each other, as they closely kept following and walking behind the Blessed One and the Sangha of bhikkhus. So this is the conversation going on between the bhikkhus. Later, on realizing the nature of the conversation taking place amongst those bhikkhus, the Blessed One went and approached the place where they had gathered and sat on the seat that was made ready for him. He then addressed those bhikkhus by asking, "Bhikkhus, what were you all engaged in discussing earlier, having gathered here? What might have been the topic of your conversation before my arrival, which was interrupted as a result?" And those bhikkhus replied respectfully by saying, "Bhante, having gathered here at sunrise, prior to the Blessed One's arrival, we have all been engaged in a discussion by speaking the following statements to each other." So they repeat what they were saying to each other. So it's good to read every section of it. Once you have, PDF, we should be able to put it up within the next 2 weeks, maybe earlier, hopefully. So it's good to hear it through your own voice. So they say it is quite remarkable and utterly marvelous, friends, etc. That section is repeated. This, therefore, Bhante, was the topic of our conversation prior to the Blessed One's arrival. And the Blessed One replied by instructing those bhikkhus the following. Bhikkhus, if and when others speak ill of me, saying harsh, disparaging, or bitter words, by being critical and mean towards me, or whether they speak ill of the Dhamma, saying harsh, disparaging, or bitter words by being critical and mean towards the Dhamma, or whether they speak ill of the Sangha, saying harsh, disparaging, or bitter words by being critical and mean towards the Sangha, you must not allow yourselves to become triggered in any way, nor let your hearts become agitated by getting angry, indignant, or resentful and bitter. For if you do allow such things to affect you thus, bhikkhus, then you certainly will experience much difficulty in your practice as a result of having become irritated and overwhelmed by anger, which ultimately will hurt you and you alone. Remember, the actions of others will never take you to hell. It is your own actions of thought, actions of verbal action, meaning speech, communication, especially the communication you have with yourself, and physical actions. That's why the Buddha keeps repeating, the only inheritance that we have is our own kamma. So what someone else has said about you or is saying about you, despite how ruthless that might be, or how great that might be, but especially in the case of saying negative, destructive, mean things about you, that's theirs. That's theirs. They are throwing a rock over their head. And there's no protection. That's called kamma. You cannot protect yourself against kamma. Kamma, that is intentional action committed by oneself. So you will never end up having to receive the results of someone else's kamma. Only yours, which is a relief when you think of it. So the person is doing the harmful things, saying the harmful things about you, lying, spreading falsehood, even influencing your current life, maybe getting you fired, maybe getting you arrested, maybe getting you, well, your friends turning their back on you. That's happening. So one might argue, oh, yeah, Bhante, but see, they did that, so they created hardship. Yes, but you have to look at the bigger picture. That might be an opportunity for you to go to bigger fields, bigger areas, out of that hole where you lived. Newer opportunities are waiting for you. So they're doing you a favor. You don't belong there. They're waking you up from the hell that you lived in. Okay. There are bigger fields and pastures waiting for you. Okay. Versus you getting mad at them. I mean, you can imagine the bhikkhus are walking and they can overhear this person behind them. Probably he was even intentionally making his voice loud enough for them to hear that he dislikes the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Look at these bald heads. Ah, what are they doing? They know better than us, really? Etc., etc. That can enrage a person if they really take it to heart. If they say, oh, I can't believe this man is a holy man. What kind? And then you have agitation. How can you sit with that irritability? It's impossible for you to attain any level of jhana, for example. The mind is all over the place. But when you relinquish your mental hold on the person, what they said, what they're doing, what they're saying, and you remove that from your mental sentences, how could they? After all that I've done, how could they? That is a poison, the how could they part in your mental narratives. They're doing it, that's their call. Whatever they do with their life, it's up to them. I have no control. I can only try to be aware of my thoughts and my behavior. My attitude is what I can eventually, at the end, have control over, if anything. So let me work on that. Plus, it's something that most people will be unable to do because any person does that. Retaliate, jump, fight, bite, attack. Animals do that. And some animals even will stand aloof from doing that as well. They're much more collected than humans. Let's go back to the sutta. After all, bhikkhus, if and when others speak ill of me, saying harsh, disparaging, or bitter words while being critical and mean towards me, the Dhamma or the Sangha, and as a result of such statements, you let yourselves be overtaken by bitterness, losing your cool and become angry or resentful, then would it even be possible for you to recognize or appreciate what is truly lovely and constructive from all that is ugly and disheartening? No, Bhante, it would surely not be possible for us to do so. Remember, in many, many places in the suttas, in the discourses, the Buddha and the Arya Savakas, the noble disciples, always describe the Dhamma as being the true Dhamma, Saddhamma. And they also say, they give the qualifier of the Dhamma that is beautiful and lovely in its beginning, the Dhamma that is beautiful and lovely in its middle, the Dhamma that is beautiful and lovely in its consummation, in its ending. So how in the world will you be able to see any of that, taste any of that beauty and loveliness if you're agitated? You can't. It's impossible. You can't see it. You're enraged. Same thing goes when you're sad, when your heart is shrinking, collapsing. You have to shake it off as soon as possible. As soon as possible. For this reason, bhikkhus, if and when others speak ill of me, saying harsh, disparaging, and bitter words by being critical and mean towards me, or whether they speak ill of the Dhamma, saying harsh, disparaging, and bitter words by being critical and mean towards the Dhamma, or whether they speak ill of the Sangha, saying harsh, disparaging, and bitter words by being critical and mean towards the Sangha, you must remain level-headed while rationally looking at what is being expressed, and therefore distinguish what is factually true from that which is false. Hence, recognizing what is untrue as exactly that, not true, by reflecting thus. This is why such statements made are, in fact, false and not true at all. What is being expressed here against us neither represents us nor has anything to do with us at all, and therefore it does not pertain to us in any way. Now, you might get the chance to actually say these things to the people or those entities, those beings, those persons. You might, but you shouldn't lose sleep over that. I want to go and talk to them and give them a piece of my mind and say, what you're saying is true. No, that's just opening the doors, Pandora's box, as it were, for more irritating, abrasive things to be said and heard by you. And you will lose your cool again. So where this has to be said is in the stage that is your mind. You have to understand this. You have to remind yourself of the fact that, okay, what they're saying is not true. Have I done this? No. Am I sure of this? Yes. Okay. So it is false. Yes. Am I positive? Yes. Okay. So what they're saying does not represent us in any way. Yes, it doesn't. So why am I getting upset? Really? Because this has nothing to do with the truth. This is simply their opinion about me or their own prejudicial statements about me. Yeah. So why do I want to go and change their mind, literally enter their brain or try to argue and debate with them to prove them, beat them into submission to my worldview? No, they have their own legs, they have their own lungs, they have their own brain, they have their own eyes, they have their own tongue, they have their own body, basically. They can do whatever it is that they do and deal with the consequences. I am on the path that is correct. Why? Because I'm not breaking my Sīla. I'm not doing any of those things. And obviously, they are already breaking Sīla because they are lying. And the Buddha is very clear about those who lie. He says there's one place they will go when they close their eyes for the last time: hell. You know, many today's monastics and Buddhist teachers avoid that discussion totally, that topic, hells and heavens. They are very real. Anybody who lies will go to hell. It's in the suttas. And not one sutta out of thousands. In thousands of suttas, you will find this. Just the Anguttara Nikaya has thousands of mention of this. So they're lying. Okay, but I'm not, ingratiating myself or celebrating, I'm not having a parade here celebrating their entry into hell, because that is a sneaky way of perpetuating, kind of gratifying yourself with anger somehow. No, that's not what we're doing either. You see it for what it is and you drop it and you move on, because you have a life to live, a better one, in fact, than the one before. And conversely, too, because if and when others speak in praise of me, saying kind words in admiration or address me with lofty accolades, or whether they speak in praise of the Dhamma, saying kind words in admiration or address the Dhamma with many lofty accolades, or whether they speak in praise of the Sangha, saying kind words in admiration or address the Sangha with lofty accolades, you must not allow yourselves to become excited or thrilled with elation, nor let your hearts become stirred with exhilarated delight in hearing such things. So this is the opposite. Why? Because this also irritates. This also, agitates. Proper term would be agitation. It creates that fluctuation in the mind. It's not placid. There's no equanimity because you're excited. For if you do allow such things to affect you thus, bhikkhus, then you certainly will experience much difficulty in your practice as a result of having become excited and thrilled by delight, which ultimately will hurt you and you alone. For this reason, bhikkhus, if and when others speak in praise of me, saying kind words in admiration or address me with lofty accolades, or whether they speak in praise of the Dhamma, saying kind words in admiration or address the Dhamma with many lofty accolades, or whether they speak in praise of the Sangha, saying kind words in admiration or address the Sangha with lofty accolades, you must remain level-headed while rationally looking at what is being expressed, and therefore distinguish what is factually false from that which is true, hence recognizing what is true as exactly that, true, by reflecting thus. This is why such statements made are in fact true and not false at all. Okay, the Buddha has this special quality, my teacher has this special quality to stay equanimous throughout, whether someone offers him lovely, lovely words, gifts, offerings, or somebody comes in hurling insults, abusive words. You will not even see the Buddha getting sweaty, twitching his eyes, or saying, or grinding his teeth, saying, I'm preparing to attack, or you hurt me, or watch out, here I come. with my superior level of, whatever. No. What is being expressed here in support of us does in fact represent us correctly. And therefore it does pertain to us indeed. So yes, my teacher is very quiet. He speaks so eloquently, his beautiful ways of unraveling the Dhamma. There's not a single situation that I could recall where the Buddha did not say the right thing at the right time for the right people to hear and move up and out of suffering. That's true. That's true. So for me, I'm not going to write home about that, just get so excited and, create agitation in me. Who cares? The Buddha would say. Really? Move on. So this is the first part, and this is the beginning, the preamble, if you will, of what is about to start now. So now we're entering into the Sīla section, which is the cultivation of virtuous behavior. The first of which will be the Chula Sīla. Chula means shorter or small, minor section of the where the Buddha discusses virtue, the undertaking of virtue, virtuous training. So let's begin. Chula Sīla, shorter section on virtuous behavior. Bhikkhus, there are instances when an average person who is untrained and unlearned in the Dhamma speaks in praise of the Tathagata. Remember, when he's mentioning the average person, he's talking, in Pali, the term is puttujhana, the unlearned, regular, ordinary person. But in doing so, such an individual who is uninterested in living and practicing according to the noble Dhamma would be speaking words and making claims that are shallow and superficial at best. Statements that rest at the level of the mundane and trivial, not going beyond the range of what is customarily accepted by the masses, reflecting merely what are observed by that individual on the level of rules. Oh, my teacher never eats past his time. He's a good bhikkhu. My teacher, if there's this and that, and so they basically are like so stuck on, oh, my teacher sits for many hours of meditation. So that becomes a criterion for that student to judge the teacher's prowess, I guess, supremacy in something. Speculation abounds in such thinking. And what exactly is meant here by shallow and superficial praises and accolades addressed to the Tathagata when spoken by a puttujhana? Statements that rest at the level of the mundane and the trivial, staying at a low range, and as such, ones that do not go beyond what is generally accepted, merely reflecting what can be observed by the unlearned and undisciplined puttujhana, who only sees such rules as his proper gauge of showing respect, even though they are only of the mundane level. In some places in the world, in regards to bhikkhus, Buddhist Sangha, Theravada, I have seen individuals, lay people, with all kinds of, respectful accolades and all that, but highlighting one aspect of the teacher because that is what they see. That's the mundane. For them, that is the criterion with which to judge the person or to revere the person. That is also dangerous because what if the teacher is not fulfilling that criterion of yours? What happens? That is when, especially this is in terms of teachers who are really practicing, for example, Sīla, which is the higher virtues, which you won't find in a book. It comes from the transformation that takes place within the very fiber of being of that teacher who practices Sīla. He doesn't break Sīla, but he goes deeper into it. He becomes the embodiment of the Vinaya. But it will escape the gaze of the average puttujhana. They will not see it because they will judge, oh, he didn't do that. He's supposed to do that. You have the interesting story where you have an old monk and a young monk coming down from the monastery, and they're about to cross a river, and there's a young woman who's stuck. She can't cross it. The old monk sees the situation with the woman, says, jump on my back. Now, as monks, we're not allowed to touch females. Anybody knows that. Everybody knows that, including the young monk who's looking carefully and judging his teacher. How could you? How could you allow? What are we going to say to the supporters? What are we going to say? Functioning on the puttujhana level, not seeing what the old monk is doing, who's helping the young lady cross. And that's what he does. He drops her off. She doesn't exist for him anymore in his mind's eye. He doesn't recollect. Oh, yeah, I remember. No. It's done. Finished. Not so with the young monk, who's functioning on the lower level, mundane level. Puttujhana is not somebody who's not familiar with Dhamma. You could be a puttujhana and a bhikkhu. Doesn't matter. Later on in the day, they come back, they cross the river again, they go back to the monastery, they're about to sleep in their small kuti, and the young monk is still tossing and turning. He says, Bhante, how could you? And the teacher says, what? What, my son? What are you talking about? He says, oh, could you? You shattered my opinion about you. You demolished my respect for you. How could you touch that woman? He says, oh, my son, your shoulders must be killing you right now. Why, he says? Because he says, I crossed the river with that young lady, helped her. And it took maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. I dropped her off. She wasn't on my shoulder. You have been carrying her all day. See, our own criteria have to be checked. What am I judging you by? What methods? What are my standards? That's another way of understanding worldview and narratives, by the way. So you see how the Buddha is looking at somebody giving accolades because of Sīla, but he's saying, oh, this person's Sīla is totally on a very, very grosser level, mundane, extremely. But on the surface, it looks perfect. Oh, this person, when a female offers a cup of water, a glass of water, oh, he can't accept it. He has to put the piece of cloth underneath first, lay it out. The bhikkhu has a special cloth, which came up later, by the way. And the cup has to be placed on that cloth, and then the bhikkhu pulls the cup towards him first, which now makes it okay for him to touch the cup. Nobody's touching anymore, right? And then he picks up the cup, and then he can drink. Do you see the silliness of it? But if you miss a step, there's some places, some groups that will look at you and say, oh, how could you touch the cup immediately without the cloth? I'm giving you a very simple example, which happens, which is there in the minds of people. And that has become a criterion, for example. So let's move on. Here, because the puttujhana goes on reflecting, having given up all forms of violence, the recluse Gautama abstains from killing and the destruction of living beings, as he has relinquished the tendency to harm and has thrown away his weapons. And now he dwells while being caring and considerate, with aroused compassion, abiding with compassion for all living beings. So that, in his mind, is the criterion with which he can say, wow, he's a true, pure being. Why? Because he practices the first, for example, in the case of 5 precepts, he's practicing the first precept, basically. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. By giving up taking what is not freely given, the recluse Gautama only accepts what is offered or given to him. Thus he is stainless, as he protects himself by abstaining from stealing that which belongs to others. So he doesn't steal, he doesn't take what is not given. This also, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. Having given up all forms of sexuality, which belongs to the common and unholy life, the recluse Gautama thus lives a celibate holy life while completely abstaining from the low and vulgar act of sexual behavior. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. By having given up telling lies, the recluse Gautama speaks only what is truth, and is therefore someone who is most certainly trustworthy in the world. He is indeed honest and truthful, and never the trickster. Thus he remains utterly reliable and true to his word. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. By giving up slandering, the recluse Gautama does not go and tell over there what he has heard over here, to create a schism between people. Similarly, he does not tell here what he had heard over there, to create schism between people. Thus he speaks in order to join the disjointed and the separated, while strengthening the wholesome bonds between people. Fond of unity, the recluse Gautama talks words that lead to unity. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. By giving up rough and mean words, the recluse Gautama speaks politely and with a pleasant, sweet voice, with words that go straight to the heart. Thus his words are accepted by all the masses. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. By giving up frivolous speech and idle chatter, the recluse Gautama speaks at the right time, speaking only what is truth and meaningful. He speaks only the Dhamma and the discipline, and at the right time, using appropriate words and succinctly, with such words that are worth being recorded and repeated due to their beneficial nature. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. Furthermore, the recluse Gautama refrains from destroying seeds, fruit trees, and vegetable plants, while refraining from taking food at night time and at the wrong hour. He only takes 1 meal a day. He refrains from dancing, music, and musical entertainments. He refrains from decorating himself with flowers, scents, or fragrant ointments. He gives up high and stately beds. He refrains from accepting gold, silver, and money. He does not accept raw grains, raw meat, women, girls, slaves, whether men or women, goats and sheep, roosters and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses, and mares. He does not accept fields or lands. He abstains from carrying messages between people, from buying and selling, or dealing in matters unfairly, such as in measures and weights. The recluse Gautama does not take bribes, nor cheats, or engages in any insincere acts. He does not cut, kill, or bind, and he does not collect even a single morsel of food violently and in voracious, barbaric ways. In this way, bhikkhus, the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. So if you see what is observable, what is seen, If that becomes your gauge to look and value a person, to give some kind of a significance to a person, then that's not giving you the whole picture. In the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Vimamsaka Sutta, the Buddha is very clear. He says, but simply because you see something momentarily, or you hear about the teacher being this way or that, or you see a snippet of his behavior once, especially a pleasant one, that should not be the measure with which to go ahead and say, oh, this teacher is like this. Well, he's a wonderful teacher. Why? Because, well, I saw him do that. Okay. The Buddha says you should neither approve of it nor disapprove of it. Instead, you should spend some time. You should give it some time. You should interact with the teacher. You should spend some time with the teacher. And if you can, get close. I mean, be in the proximity of the monastery, be around the teacher, see the teacher in different lights, if you will. And don't come up with excuses for the teacher. No, that was different. When he beat the dog, there was a reason. When he was throwing this at the students, when he was cursing at the students, that was a unique situation, but you have to understand the teacher. He's a saint. Why? Because you saw him in one instance some time ago, and that feeling, remember? Prejudice, remember? How one feels, speculate. This is connected to, that's why it's in the Brahmajāla Sutta. So appearances go only so far. Now we go to the Majjhima Sīla, the middle section on virtuous behavior. If you notice, I'm reading a lot more because, as I said in the beginning, without offering much commentary in this section, because I've already covered it in the Puttapa that I mentioned. So if you want to hear more, you could listen to that. Furthermore, because the puttujhana continues reflecting the virtues of the Tathagata thus. While there are many recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them by taking it for granted, however, they remain inconsiderate and careless as they engage in mistreating and being disrespectful and abusive towards seeds of all kinds and plant life too. Thus, they make no distinction in their maltreatment of plant life, whether those that have been started from roots, from cutting, grafting, budding, from stems and seeds, acting in such a destructive, blind, and self-serving manner. All those behaviors, however, the recluse Gautama completely abstains from, while abhorring living and practicing such a damaging and ungrateful lifestyle. This too, because is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. While there are other recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful, who trust in them and see to their needs and their requisites of food. Being inconsiderate and careless of all that support, however, they go on greedily hoarding and storing food when others struggle to survive. Yet, they keep hoarding and storing up edible food, various types of drinks, robes, vehicles for transport, bedding, oils and fragrant incense, drying and storing up meat, all so that they could enjoy consuming them later in the future. And so while these individuals choose to live in such a greedy, blind, and self-serving manner, the recluse Gautama, however, completely abstains from such behavior, while abhorring, hoarding, and storing food and resources for his own personal use. See, this person's idea, narrative, takes that as equal to this person being holy. The recluse Gautama is holy because, see, he doesn't do that. That is not looking at the big picture. I remember one time a bhikkhu was saying how he had kept his Sīla by not eating or by not hoarding food. When he was wandering through India, a Westerner, by the way, recent years, and he was walking through an area in India, And he goes up to his kuti, and a young shepherd boy sees him, a local who cannot speak English at all or any Western language. So he goes, the bhikkhu goes to his kuti at the top of the hill, very difficult to get to. And he's sitting there, and then he hears some sound. And in the darkness, he notices a figure show up. And it's that young boy with a big banana stalk full of bananas. So the boy who can barely eat, who has enough food, very skinny, almost skeleton, felt that this was a holy person and brought at night food that who knows how he was able to get, because he's hungry. But to give dana to someone who's not even of his faith, he's a Hindu, most probably, a young boy, and he happens to be a bhikkhu, a Westerner. Can't speak a word of this bhikkhu's language, and the bhikkhu doesn't speak a word of the local language. And the boy is smiling because he climbed up this steep hill at night without a flashlight, bringing this food, and laid it in front of the bhikkhu's feet and said in Anjali, because he thought the bhikkhu was hungry, and he was. Guess what the bhikkhu does? Oh, it's after hours. I cannot accept. I can't eat. Yes, it's after. It's an improper time, but I can't even keep it. Why? Because in the rules it says you should not have any hoarding going on, keeping food, irrespective of what was happening in front of him. This is blindness. This is stupidity. This is ingratitude, and this is a lack in generosity on part of the bhikkhu to see the beautiful opportunity that this boy has of making merits. Look how far the boy has come at night, climbing a cliff with a whole stack of bananas. This was totally inhumane on the part of the bhikkhu. But people who support and huddle around such a bhikkhu, they will say, that's a bhikkhu. That's what a puttujhana does. This is no different than that young bhikkhu who was scolding the teacher, saying, how could you carry that woman over your back? This is when the person becomes slave to rites and rituals and not see the value of the humanity that was in front. And guess what he does? He gives the boy back. He says, okay, I accept the banana, but go ahead and take it back. Who knows how the boy understood that gesture? It was seen as a refusal. And the boy just takes the banana and goes. Hopefully he gets home safely, coming down the cliff at night. That might have been the very last action of that boy in this life. And the boy might have died climbing back down. But that action might have landed him in heavenly realms, might even allowed him to attain. But that opportunity was stricken down by the bhikkhu, who was, for all intents and purposes, a puttujhana, not understanding the Dhamma and the Vinaya at all. No concept of Sīla at all, because his teachers had taught him that. And you have a lot of this today, especially in Western bhikkhus. A lot of that. Blindness. So the Buddha says, this too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. Next, while there are recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them and see to their needs and their requisites of food, yet they remain inconsiderate and careless in their disposition, forgetting their role as religious practitioners who are supposed to be living the holy life. And instead, they spend their time entertaining themselves by watching various kinds of shows, such as dancing, singing, concerts, and musical events, choruses and other oral recitations, drumming and playing on cymbals, hand clapping, moving picture shows, circus performances, elephants performing or fighting, horses performing or fighting, buffaloes, roosters, goats, rams, quails, and also human beings performing or fighting with each other, as well as attending carnivals, wrestling and boxing matches, battle reenactments, military demonstrations and shows, troops being in action or doing their drills. And so, while others engage in such activities that are wasteful of precious time, the recluse Gautama utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such behaviors entirely. This too, because is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. So these are another form of standard that people have, using Sīla, the aspect of mundane, aspect of Sīla. Remember, this is building up to, once this, the Sīla section is over, you will see how the Buddha is going to connect this to the real proper way of, and it carries all the way to the end of the sutta, by the way. You will see how the Buddha really acknowledges the accolades presented or directed to him by an individual who respects and venerates him for the right reason, for the right practice, for the right understanding, for the right release, because none of this stuff is going to actually release a person from samsara, from delusion, really. Doesn't matter how much Sīla you practice, it's not going to save you on its own. Panya is lacking. Panya is lacking. Wisdom is lacking. If it's done like this. There happen to be recluses, religious practitioners and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful, who trust in them and see to their needs and their requisites of food. But they are in fact inconsiderate and careless, forgetting their role as religious practitioners who are supposed to be living the holy life. Thus they live heedlessly while spending their time playing various kinds of games, such as 8 and 10 row chess, checkers, hopscotch, dice games, stick throwing games, drawing pictures through tracing of the palms. I don't know what that is in those days, I guess. Doing somersaults, gymnastics, acrobatics, playing with toy pipes, cars and other vehicles, running and chasing one another, playing with toy plows, toy windmills, toy measures, toy chariots, building and playing with toy weapons like bows and arrows. Imagine bhikkhus playing with bows and arrows. As well as guessing games such as charades, guessing letters written in the air, riddles for amusements, guessing each other's thoughts, mimicking and pretending to be deformed or handicapped to amuse themselves or others. And so, while others engage in such activities that are wasteful of precious time, the recluse Gautama utterly and completely refuses to entertain himself or others, as he abstains from engaging in such behaviors entirely. This too, because is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There happen to be recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful, who trust in them and see to their needs and their requisites of food. But they are in fact inconsiderate and careless, abusing that trust as they go and seek a lavish and luxurious lifestyle, such as fancy and opulent furnishings and accommodations for themselves, ornate and expensive chairs, thrones, extravagant seats, oversized couches, using animal hides as their rugs and throws, carpets, covers, and drapes with long tassels and laces, multicolored pillows, pillows made of cotton, of fine embroidery, pillows and covers made of wool, coverlets and pillowcases embroidered with precious gems, gold, fine materials, or animal figures, hides from all sorts of animals such as elephants, lions, tigers, antelope, deer, beds, couches, and seats with awnings, or having stuffed quilts, or red fluffy cushions for the head and feet. And so, while others engage in such a lavish lifestyle that is so wasteful, the recluse Gautama utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from engaging in such behaviors and from seeking a lavish and opulent lifestyle entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. While there are recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful, who trust in them and see to their needs and the requisites of food, they are in fact inconsiderate and careless, forgetting their role as religious practitioners who are supposed to be living the holy life, abusing that trust by enjoying, seeking out, or demanding that they use fine unguents, fragrances, precious oils, and ghee, along with various fine rubbing powders for their body and massaging oils to treat themselves too, as well as perfumed water to bathe in, and different types of cosmetic products to beautify themselves with or to look younger, such as by using mirrors, garlands, unguents, creams, mascara, that's interesting, bracelets, headbands, along with head and foot gear, turbans, ornamented water containers, swords, fancy sunshades and fans, lavish sandals, walking sticks, yak tail whisks, robes with long fringes and tassels. And so, while others seek to live in such absurd ways, having a lavish lifestyle that is so wasteful, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely abstaining from pampering or beautifying himself because he refuses to engage in such behaviors entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful, who trust in them and see to their needs and their requisites of food. But they are, in fact, inconsiderate and careless, forgetting their role as religious practitioners, abusing that trust by engaging in frivolous talk and idle chatter, which is unbefitting to those who say they are living the holy life. Thus they engage in useless talk and gossip about kings and rulers, ministers of state, their armies and military prowess, the dangers or threats they present, battles and wars, as well as talking about food and drink, clothing, types of furniture, engaging in all types of street talk, or chatting about robbers and thieves, discussing such trivial topics as chariots, vehicles, villages or towns, major cities and their populations, differences among them, talking around the watering hole about heroes and women, or those who have died, discussing philosophical points about the past or the future that lead nowhere, talking about the creation of the world and the oceans, or whether they are truly existing or not, in addition to talking about winning and losing. And so, while others seek to live in such absurd ways, engaging in useless and frivolous discussions that are so wasteful, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, while abstaining from such wasteful talk entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are other recluses and Brahmins who live but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. Yet they are adamantly passionate about debating and winning in arguments, more than striving to live and practice the holy life, as they go on claiming. You definitely do not understand this doctrine and discipline. This is them saying to each other. I, on the other hand, thoroughly understand this doctrine and discipline. At best, your understanding of it is quite pathetic, whereas my understanding of it goes deep. Plus, you are practicing it all wrong, unlike me, who knows how to practice. You are not consistent either, whereas I am very consistent. Also, what should have been said, you spoke at the very last. Meanwhile, what should have been spoken last, you said first. Anyhow, Whatever you thought you were defending or claiming has been already defeated and debunked. So might as well just admit you're done for and are now vanquished. Go and work on your theories, and perhaps you could salvage some of it. You are caught and have no way out of this argument with me. So while others waste the precious opportunity of living the holy life by such damaging, absurd, and useless activities, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such contentious and infantile modes of behavior entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. While there are recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins who live through the generosity of the faithful, who trust in them and see to their needs and the requisites of food, yet they remain inconsiderate and careless in their disposition, forgetting their role as religious practitioners who are supposed to be living the holy life. Instead, they start engaging in taking messages back and forth, serving as go-betweens between kings and rulers, ministers and other heads of state, warrior princes and other nobles, Brahmins, merchants, and other householders and their youths, meanwhile running errands for them and doing their bidding while being directed thus: come here, go there, take this there, bring that over here, etc. And so, while others waste living the holy life in such foolish and damaging ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such behaviors entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are other recluses and Brahmins who live, but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. Instead, they keep up pretenses by being deceitful, as they live while taking advantage of their position by flattering others and those from whom they anticipate some benefit or gain, insinuating and hinting at things to gain some benefit while trying to hide their evil tracks, pressuring supporters against their will to do things for them, thereby abusing their role as well as the trust such supporters or students have towards them, pushing others, whether through force, intimidation, and especially coercion, to make offerings, following the strategy of you scratch my back and I will scratch yours. That was not a term in those days. I use this because the sentiment is exactly the same. It represents that which was presented in the Pali original. It captures it, I think, beautifully. In addition to lying about their practice and spiritual attainments. And so, while others seek to live the holy life through deception and false pretenses in order to gain some benefit or influence over others, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly abstains from such behaviors and completely refuses to support keeping up pretenses in any form, while living with honesty and practicing truthfully throughout. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. Now we are at the last section of the Sīla section, which is the Mahasīla, the greater section on virtuous behavior, which we will do next, and then we will stop. So I could save my throat, my voice. Yes. If you have any questions, just leave them at the end, and we'll address them accordingly. So Mahasīla, the greater section on virtuous behavior. There are recluses and Brahmins who live, but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. Excuse me. And thus, instead of striving to live and practice the holy life, They seek out ways to enhance their livelihood by engaging in wrong means. This they do by making predictions, divinations, and engaging in all forms of fortune telling, psychic readings, casting spells, by reciting, giving, or providing of special protective charms, amulets, and the like. And thus they engage in reading signs and omens, reading tea leaves, marks or lines on limbs as in palmistry and other bodily features, interpreting cosmic events, constellations, movements of celestial objects, interpreting dreams, reading and interpreting various scratch marks on pieces of bones, offering fire or water blessings. Sorry, I just remembered something. When I was in Asia, I was confronted by a situation where in temples, I noticed lay people would buy a car, a new car or used car, their new car. They would swing by the temple first so that the abbot could do a water blessing on. I was transported back to being in the monastery, in the Christian monastery years ago as a teenager, where I would see things like that, chanting, and has nothing to do with the Dhamma. Nothing. And later I found that they were making a lot of money. Temple was gaining a lot, at least the abbot was gaining a lot of money from such abhorring practices. And people would line up to bring their cars to get blessing. But this, we see this was a practice, not just in Buddhism, but this was, so people are saying the recluse Gautama does not do such thing, does not engage in such thing. That's why he is venerated. But we know that that's not the case in the case of the sasana, where we do this, where abbots and monks do this. Quite, I was going to say disturbing, but anyhow, moving on. Blessing, interpreting various scratch marks on pieces of bones, offering fire or water blessings, oblations with a ladle, whisks with ivory or horns, or oblations and blessings through rice grains, ghee, and various types of oils. Furthermore, they engage in making sacrifices by chanting mantras, doing blood sacrifices, making predictions about the person by looking at the shape of their fingertips, causing scars, whether to oneself or unto others, by means of breaking or burning the skin. There's some tattooing that is done by burning the skin, or sometimes even scratching, cutting the skin, to really make it, permanent, more permanent than a tattoo. If you can imagine that. It's painful, more painful than a tattoo usually is. As well as applying tattoos as some kind of protection against harm, such as a garden or a building, foretelling as to, I'm sorry, I missed that part, against harm, engaging in geomancy, geomancy, so as to determine the best location and position for a new structure, such as a garden or a building, foretelling as to who will be the next ruler or important political figure, comforting and pushing away demons, doing exorcism, snake charming, treating poisons from various animals, insects and rodents, interpreting the footprints of scorpions, snakes, and other animals, making predictions by interpreting the calls of animals, bird sounds, and forecasting the date of a person's death, making charms or reciting them to ward off and protect against arrows and other projectiles. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood and such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. This too, because is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are recluses and Brahmins who live, but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites, which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them, but instead they seek out more ways to obtain their livelihood and through wrong means, such as making predictions and forecasting various things, as in identifying the power of gems and crystals, in terms of which among them brings more, in terms of which among them brings more good luck or fortune. Similarly, helping in the selection of garments, staffs, swords, and other weapons, helping in the selection of the best among the women one is to marry, as well as getting involved with the selection of boys and girls, male and female slaves for one's retinue or household, helping choose the best animals for someone, as in selecting the best elephants, horses, buffaloes, cows, oxen, goats, rams, deer, chickens, quail, rabbits, tortoises, and other animals. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood in such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are recluses and Brahmins who live but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites, which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. But instead, they greedily seek out ways to obtain their livelihood through wrong means, such as making predictions and foretelling future events, as in who the next ruler of the domain would be to lead the people, while predicting their future actions and strategies, predicting how those in power will behave or which direction they would take in the event of wars, or how they would be attacking, advancing or retreating, and in which direction, how the attacking rulers would triumph or how they would be defeated, etc. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood and use such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. Now remember, in the next section, which we'll begin next week, the Buddha is, after he's done with the puttujhana, he will convert to the noble disciple who offers homage and accolades to the Buddha, and how that differs from the veneration done by the puttujhana. There's a difference, because there's an understanding that goes beyond the superficial and the mundane, which the puttujhana is clueless about. That's why they're called puttujhana. The noble disciple was a puttujhana too once, but they broke that barrier. They broke that barrier through the help of the Noble Eightfold Path, through the practice of the three trainings: Sīla, Samadhi, mind, cultivation, and Panya. So that will come next week. So we're nearing the end of today's Sīla section, which is the Mahasīla, in case you were wondering. There are recluses and Brahmins who live but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. And instead of striving to live and practice the holy life, they still go and seek out ways to obtain their livelihood through the wrong means, such as by predicting or forecasting various natural or weather events, as in when the next solar or lunar eclipse is going to take place, or other transitions having to do with the sun or the moon, or both combined, making predictions about celestial phenomena and what those things mean. Also, explaining when the next meteor shower will take place, the darkening of the sky, when or why some clouds or thunderstorms would be happening or not, when or why earthquakes would be taking place, forecasting the position of the sun or the moon, their shape, color, or impact on other phenomena, etc. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood in such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are recluses and Brahmins who live but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites which they receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. And yet, instead of striving to live and practice the holy life, they seek out ways to increase the support they already receive by engaging in wrong livelihood, such as by foretelling and making predictions, as in forecasting when the next abundant rainfall would take place, or whether there will be a drought, predicting whether there will be famine or drought, whether wars or dangers are on their way to be faced by the public, whether there will be disease and hardship. Also, engaging in accounting work or measuring and calculating things, or composing chants or poetry as a way of making a living or gaining profits. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood in such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are recluses and Brahmins who live but while being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites, which they already receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. And yet, they still seek out ways to increase the provision they might further get, and thus go on engaging in wrong livelihood. This they do by forecasting the various major events in people's lives, as in calculating what date, time, or place would be most auspicious for significant activities for individuals and their families, such as designating the best time for wedding or marriage ceremonies, or divorces, or for purchasing property, or for borrowing money or investing in financial endeavors. Similarly, making charms or protective amulets or writing, engraving, tattooing special spells to make one attractive or desirable, or immune to dangers, as well as prosperous and successful, or helping couples be parents by helping the woman get pregnant, or for protecting pregnant women from having miscarriages, or inducing abortion, chanting or reciting or writing spells on individuals' body parts to bring about a certain desirable effect, as in cases of paralysis, blindness, stuttering, or inability to speak, or making the person lose control over their limbs, making them incapacitated, or go blind, mute, or deaf. Also, playing the role of an oracle, providing answers to questions while looking into a body of water, a mirror, a young boy's or girl's fingernails, or inducing the children to become mediums to give him the answers he seeks, becoming a medium himself by going into a trance, invoking spirits, or worshiping some devas or Mahabrahma to get good fortune for himself or others. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood and such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. This too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata, while paying homage and showering him with accolades. There are recluses and Brahmins, being inconsiderate and careless of their role and significance, given the support of food and requisites they already receive through the generosity of the faithful who trust in them. But instead, they still seek out ways to increase their resources by engaging in wrong livelihood. Thus, they dabble in low and vile practices such as concocting various protective chants or substances, writings, potions, etc., to induce certain desired outcomes, whether to promote healing for someone or to harm them, or even to kill them. And thus they engage in showing people how to bless or protect a house from unwanted energies, how to overcome impotence or enhance virility, engaging in the consecration of sites prior to construction, showing people how to conduct ceremonial bathing or how to ritualistically wash the mouth, conducting fire rituals, engaging in the preparation of medicinal potions, as in diuretics, laxatives, purgatives, etc., or preparing eye or ear drops, or various treatments with oils to be taken internally through the mouth, through the eyes, ears, or nose, or applied topically, or the application of balms and other mixtures, topically or by rubbing them onto the joints, limbs, or the skin. And so, while others seek to live the holy life by wasting it as they engage in wrong livelihood and such useless ways, the recluse Gautama, however, utterly and completely refuses to do so, abstaining from such inferior and debased practices entirely. Now, this too, bhikkhus, is why and how the ordinary and untrained person, the puttujhana, goes on praising the Tathagata while paying homage and showering him with accolades. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what is meant here by shallow and superficial praises and accolades addressed to the Tathagata when spoken by a puttujhana. Statements that rest at the level of the mundane and the trivial, staying at that low range. They do not go beyond what is generally accepted, merely reflecting what can be observed by the puttujhana, who only sees such rules as his proper gauge of showing respect, even though they are only of the mundane level. And we stop here today. It's a powerful sutta, heavy sutta, dense. Remember, these were words spoken by the Buddha, so there's no point in fast forwarding anything. To simplify things. What is speculation after all, if not oversimplification? Denial of facts. That's what speculation is. Another word for it is generalization. Oh, the world is a mean place. Really? You might have plenty of evidence to support that, I grant you. But the world is also the place where we have the Dhamma peeking through, the opportunity to break free from the world, from existence. And remember, the understanding of the world, in Pali, the term is loka, which I don't like to use the word world. Instead, I like to use existence, because the understanding of world today is very much convoluted. It's very deranged. It's very flawed. It's very specific to certain themes, thematically augmented by things that we accept, contemporary world accepts. And that's it. It doesn't go beyond the understanding of the world. Meanwhile, the Buddha says it very clearly. He says it's the six senses. This was a challenge. This completely threw everyone off. They didn't know. It was a surprise. Nobody else, no other tradition ever presents such a thing. So it's not outside of you, really. It's all that your six senses bring to you through contact that you make. Not just the contact. If we stop at contact, it's still good. What we make of that contact is at the helm of our lives, whether it's a lovely, beautiful life or a miserable one. Because contact doesn't stay contact only. It passes on and becomes a feeling that we adore or we hate, or we completely neglect because it's uninteresting, it's too boring. And now we are stuck back, gone back to samsara. That is the epitome, that's the essence of a puttujhana. And the reason why we have come back again and again and again and again, repeating. So may this time be the last. That's why we have the suttas. That's why we have the Dhamma. Are there any thoughts, questions, comments? This definitely is not a sutta that you can just do in one sitting, one listening, and then done. Check. No, none of these suttas are supposed to be like that. Oh yes, I've covered the suttas. It's never the case. Never should be the case, I think. Some of you might already know because I mentioned it in the last session, I think. But now I finally am dedicating time to compiling all the Anguttara Nikaya. So, which is already translated. I finished it a few years ago, but narrated and all that. But because of so many requests of having something that people could at least print the PDF of, or even one day hopefully have an actual hard copy of, which they definitely deserve, the 11 books, the 11 volumes. Currently, I'm working on book number 5. So I reached book number 5 out of 11. And the term which I don't use usually, flabbergasted. I'm just floored by the simplicity, but the beauty of the suttas and how poignant they are. And I see them as if I'm seeing them for the first time. Remember, I spent a lot of time on each of these, some more than a few weeks, or even in some cases, months, rare cases, but spend a lot of time on the sutta. And you think that you remember it immediately. You don't. So I'm seeing that, wow, it's like the first time I'm seeing this. It's like, wow, how come I missed this? How come I missed this? It's a wonderful surprise. And I think that is a sentiment that is truly magnificent for all of us to enjoy, for anyone who comes in contact with the Dhamma. But so please, my encouragement here is not to leave it as a one time, I'll listen to it once and that's it. My goal is to listen to all of the suttas, all of the nikayas, the thousands and thousands of suttas, and that's my goal. That's not as interesting as maybe you have one verse from one of the suttas in the, let's say, Sutta Nipata, one verse, which is in the thousands of verses, by the way. But you keep repeating it. It's like, it's so powerful to you. It's significant. But you have to give it its chance of reaching your heart. You have to revisit it again and again and again and again. Randomly open up the suttas or listen to the suttas, and sometimes it's just going to hit it if you're there to listen. Really. It's truly beautiful. And we'll stop now. If there are no thoughts, comments, questions, then yes, let's transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anamoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anamoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anamoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be rejuvenated every single time you're mindful. By the way, that's not like a wish. Every time you are mindful, truly, you become rejuvenated. May you go deeper and deeper in your practice and understanding of the Dhamma. May you inhabit your life and really, really expand and reach into the deepest recesses of your mind through understanding, which only the light of Dhamma can provide the access and the wonders that that itself will bring into your life, into your behavior. And you become truly the person for whom the Dhamma was taught in the first place. The wise, who will only be the ones who realize it for themselves, ultimately through practice and application. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you keep smiling from your heart, from the bottom of your feet, tops of your head. May difficulties, challenges, if they show up, may they show up simply to enhance the quality of your life and the deepening of understanding. May suffering diminish in your life. May you be prosperous and healthy. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you and all your loved ones. Sukyot. Until next time. See you next week.